Funding for the production of Folks is provided in part by the Friends of LPB.
These children aren't just singing, they're learning all about mammals. Hello everyone, I'm Rob Hinton.
And I'm Genevieve Stewart. Today on Folks, we'll show you how one teacher in Baton Rouge is using songs to teach science and social studies. We'll also share with you some thoughts on why some of our children are having trouble reading.
Then we'll take you to a fascinating art exhibit in New Orleans entitled Exposition in Black. Singing, learning, and art today on Folks.
Everybody says folks, just plain old folks. Everybody says people all over the world. Folks who live, folks got to give, folks got to care, folks got to share. Our world is small, so very small. What touches one of us, who touches us all? To stay alive, just to survive, folks got to be in harmony. Everybody just folks, just plain old folks, just plain old folks. Everybody just folks, everybody just folks, just plain old folks, just plain old folks. Everybody just folks.
Songs that teach? Well, one veteran teacher in Baton Rouge is using music to teach her students science and social studies. We'll have that story coming up shortly. But first, we'd like to share with you a story that we did last fall on reading skills. Testing of Louisiana school children has revealed that many of them have poor reading skills. Why can't our children read? And how do speech and language affect learning? Well, these were some of the questions we put to the educational experts.
Taylor is an associate professor of English at Southern University in New Orleans. Dr. Marilyn Hamilton is an associate professor of speech at LSU in Baton Rouge. Both teachers concur that without a good start in speech, reading, and writing, a child's chances for future success are greatly diminished. These language arts begin at birth with speech. From the earliest stages, a child must have an adequate vocabulary to begin the learning process.
But you might want to begin to suspect problems if around 12 months the child is not using any meaningful words, because we know that according to the norms, 12-month-olds have at least a 50-word vocabulary of meaningful words. When they say baba, they mean bottle. Maybe that's all they can produce phonologically, but it's meaningful because that particular string or that particular syllable or syllables refer to the word bottle, okay? So at that point, after 12 months, let's say, about 18 months, children begin to combine two-word. They begin to get into the two-word stage. So you want to notice that if at around 2 under or slightly over, your child is not combining words meaningfully, then this might caution you, or this might be a warning to you to continue observing, maybe get a professional opinion, etc. 3-year-olds tend to speak in short, simple sentences. By the time a child is about 4, a normally developing child can string a grammatically complete sentence together. That child is comprehending it's significantly large number of words. There's just a lot of progress going on. In other words, you can say the child at about 4 has really begun to crack the linguistic code.
Children should have acquired adequate, functioning verbal skills by the 4th grade. If their language arts abilities are not intact by then, school can become increasingly difficult for students who are trying to master any subject.
By the time the child is in 4th grade, the world changes. The child is now expected to comprehend more complex sentences, to get meaning from topics that he or she may not have experienced necessarily. may not have acted upon. So if at that point and in subsequent school years the child has a language problem that has not gotten remediated at a younger level, you might suspect that as the language learning process becomes more complex, which it will and which it does, and the child's delay is still there, the learning or the academic success in school will certainly be hindered or hampered, or the child will certainly encounter difficulties in learning. And this should transcend all subjects, since language is involved in all subjects.
Once a child's speech skills are operating, the natural progression in language arts is reading and writing. This poses another problem. With Louisiana's statewide testing of elementary students in reading, extensive weaknesses were revealed. Standardized testing on the parish level further confirmed the state's test results. And the parishes also cited poor reading achievement for all grades. Dr. Willene Taylor states some reasons for students' difficulties in reading and writing.
Our students cannot read and write because basically many of them come from homes where writing and reading are not emphasized. In addition, television plays a great part in the lives of our children. They spend, in my opinion, too much time watching TV and not spending enough with the printed page. The greatest inhibitor to children learning how to write is that we as educators have not demanded that they write. We as educators have not demanded that they write. We often let them get by with the excuse that they cannot write, they will never learn how to write, and it is my philosophy that if one is in an ocean, for example, and he has an alternative of swimming or drowning, that he will swim. Another thing, that these overcrowded classrooms, and the teachers, let's say, sometimes have 40 and 50 students in the classroom. And so instead of giving them essays to write, many of the students, for example, that I've taught here at Southern in New Orleans, have told me, I don't know how true it is, but from the way that some of them write, that they had never written an essay or a composition until they got to college.
Doctors Taylor and Hamilton agreed that parents can play a very supportive role in developing their children's language skills. Parents should also carefully screen daycare centers, where toddlers spend a great portion of their early formative years.
One thing that the parents can do, if they don't read in the home, they can start reading, emphasizing reading. I often take the view that even if you read a funny book or a wrestling book, that's better than reading nothing at all. Also, you should take your child to the library as often as possible, so that this child can learn that there are books and that there's much to be learned vicariously through books. Enroll your children in the little summer programs on reading. This can keep them out of the streets. We know that children can get in a lot of trouble during the summer when they don't have anything to do.
If children are to be placed in daycare centers or must be placed in daycare centers for whatever reasons, parents must screen these facilities to be sure that language is a high priority, is a major focus of even the daycare center that's managing the child from 0 to 3, let's say, because those are the formative years when concepts are developed, vocabulary, the child is getting a handle on how to string things together grammatically, etc. And then this prime focus must continue through the school years if the child is going to be successful.
Testing is one means of assessing a child's knowledge. But without sound language arts, students cannot adequately communicate what they know. Test results are often used as a criteria for determining a child's future educational opportunities and job placement.
When you think of an intelligence test, many of us never stop to think how heavily loaded these assessment instruments are with language items. In fact, if you were to go through an average test, you would find maybe 75% of the items depend upon a person's knowledge of language. So there's an automatic bias there. If a person is language delayed, language disordered, is exhibiting a deviancy, etc., whatever the adjective we want to choose to describe the problem, well, then that person is doubly burdened or doubly biased by being administered an assessment instrument that requires him to, that's going to measure intelligence, but is going to require him to have adequate language skills.
If parents would insist that their children go to the library and read, they would be able to pass all of these standardized tests that they're going to have trouble with later, like the LSAT, the SAT, and others, and the National Teachers Exam, which so many of our teachers are having trouble with now.
Ghetto dialect, or Black English, is considered a definite deterrent to standard language development. Dr. Hamilton explains that ghetto language has an overriding detrimental effect on learning most subject matter.
Let's think of a child going into a classroom who is speaking what we might call the typical Black dialect. Okay, the child certainly must make some adjustments in the classroom. That child's language style perhaps is not like the language style of the teacher or maybe of the majority of the children in the classroom. That child's language style is not like the language style used in the textbooks. Therefore, you can see some automatic barriers there.
You remember that one of our professional organizations came out with the resolution that students had a right to their language, whatever it was, whether that was ghetto speech or Appalachian speech. I think that did more to inhibit writing on the part of our students than anything else. Just because someone grows up in the ghetto, we cannot allow him to write ghetto speech. We must let him know that in this country there is such a thing as standard speech. And if you're going to get a job, you're going to have to use that standard speech.
The standards for Louisiana college students majoring in education have been raised significantly in recent years. The required student teaching time, or actual classroom experience, has been tripled. And future elementary school teachers must complete 3 courses in reading instruction. Dr. Taylor feels that this may not be the only answer for producing literate students.
I think that if you have the dedicated teacher, if you don't have any of the other aides or anything, if you have a dedicated teacher, you're going to have a very literate student. Now, many of the students of today had many more opportunities than I did. Much more financial aid, many more learning aids. But I learned how to read, write, subtract, divide, and add in spite of all of that, because we were held to a standard of excellence. We were not allowed to tell our teacher that we were black in America, that we had been exploited, because they didn't listen to that. All they wanted to know is that, look, you are going to have to learn to read and write, and if not, you're going to have to take this class over. We shouldn't deal with methods as much as dealing with content. If you know how to read yourself, and I don't want to speak against education because I went to a teacher's college myself, but it was my opinion at that time that we spent too much time on the method courses, on how to teach, and not what to teach. Now, if they're going to teach what to teach rather than how to teach, then I'm all for these courses. But to teach someone that you go out in the schools and this is the way you teach reading, without, and many times those people don't know how to read themselves, and I hate to say that. But I think the emphasis should be placed upon putting out a very literate product from the university. And if he's literate, he's going to know how to teach his students how to read and write.
Remember when you were in grammar school and your teacher used to lead you in a sing-along? I used to think they were a lot of fun. Well, there's a teacher in Baton Rouge who is very big on sing-alongs. However, she uses them in a very unique way. You see, she uses sing-alongs to teach her fifth grade students science and social studies. The teacher is Osceola Johnson. Not only does she use songs to teach her fifth grade class science and social studies, but she also writes and composes the songs.
I had already had really a knack or really cultivated a love for songs, and I already had the attitude toward singing, that singing does motivate children as to wanting to learn and to sing the songs that they're going to learn, whatever they're going to learn about. So it must have taken me, I would say, about 5 or 6 years to get motivated. And then after the motivation, then I started writing the songs. And consequently, I wrote a lot of songs that I didn't think I could write. I have written more songs than I think I would ever write. And not only for the schools, I have written songs for clubs and organizations and for the church. And in other words, I sometimes wonder if I'm in the right field, whether I should be a classroom teacher or music teacher. But songs for teach, songs that teach, really teach in so many ways.
The children do more than learn as they sing. With these songs about mammals, they get an opportunity to portray the animal.
The children are highly motivated from the songs that teach because it tells them a story. It gives them something to think about. And it also motivates them to want to do additional research. It motivates them to want to act out the song. And I really think it makes them learn and remember what they have learned much longer than they would otherwise.
Here's a song Mrs. Johnson wrote about the bunny rabbit.
Bunny rabbit, hop, 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 where you hiding, stop, 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 in the garden patch, raise the letters, crunch, 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 Charlie carrot, crunch, 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 wiggling nose, bouncing feet, in the garden patch.
Bunny, one more time.
Bunny rabbit, hop, 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 where you hiding, stop, 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 in the garden patch, raise the letters, crunch, 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 Charlie carrot, crunch, 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 wiggling nose, bouncing feet, in the garden patch.
Right now, Mrs. Johnson's songs that teach are part of a pilot program underway in several East Baton Rouge Parish schools.
These songs that teach are used in 2 of our schools in the parish. And when I talked to Mr. Story about the songs, he was very, very impressed. And he said he wanted to try them out in some of our schools, and he's using them in 2 of our schools in the parish with one of our most competent music teachers, I would say Mrs. Carolyn McKee. And in talking with her, I understand that they're doing very, very well. One thing about the songs, they do touch on 2 broad areas, and that's science and social studies. Sometimes we get the feeling that we work with reading so hard and so long and maybe with mathematics that maybe that the areas of science and social studies might be neglected to some extent. I hope not anyway. But songs that teach do go into science and social studies, and they do go into the area of language skills, as in the example we did this morning with omission of the first letter and building other words. It goes into a building of vocabulary of other words. So songs that teach you go into the areas of science and social studies. It goes into music and the areas of fine arts and language skills.
To close our show today, we traveled to the Contemporary Art Center in New Orleans to take a look at a fascinating art exhibition entitled Exposition in Black.
Exposition in Black is significant in the Louisiana art world. It is the first showing at a major gallery to focus totally on Louisiana's black artists. It was 2 years in the making. Critically acclaimed painter Richard Thomas is guest curator for the exhibit. He explains the scope of the show and how the artists were selected.
Well, actually, the show took about 2 years to get together. We first tried to jury the work by having artists to submit their work, and from that, I think we had maybe 200 artists that submitted work from all over Louisiana, and that still wasn't everybody, you know, and so we had to find other effective means of getting as many folks to submit some work or get a chance to see their work. So it meant going out and traveling and finding these artists. So once that happened, we narrowed it down to about 35 artists, and then we narrowed it down to about 25. And as you know, right now the show has 29 artists that are represented here from all over the state. from as far as, well, Shreveport, Lafayette, Lake Charles, Baton Rouge, New Orleans, and other areas here.
Thomas especially feels the need for greater visibility of the black artist. These exhibiting artists have a goal in mind. They want the public to view their works on their own merit, while challenging the art establishment to recognize them as professional, educated artists in their own right. Black artists are known historically for their folk art, but this exhibit demonstrates that this is not the limit of their art. Thomas emphasized the range and variety of mediums among black artists.
We can almost begin to say that there is a black aesthetic. There is something that black artists are doing that is unique, that is of his own. And I think as we probably do more studying and investigating into this, we will find well, there's another artist here whose works are featured in this show by the name of Stephanie Jackson, who in a sense sums up the whole thing with what she's doing because of all the elements that she superimposes over each other. She does these altar pieces that are sort of reminiscent of some of the altars that you find in some folks' home in New Orleans, or in Algiers, the sort of the voodoo worshipers or whatever, but they're ritualistic in one sense, and at the same time you see the Christian influence because they're images of and symbols related to Christianity, and at the same time it's talking about a feeling, it's talking about a black experience here in America, and I think that that's important. I think that when we begin to explore those kinds of things, it's almost like what the jazz musicians did for jazz music, or what the blues musicians did for the blues, and the gospel and the spiritual. It all came out of the same struggles. And I think that the same thing that those cats did with music, and the same sounds and the same feelings that they express, can be found in the visual artists, the black visual artists here in Louisiana, which I think is very interesting.
Xavier University graduate and contemporary artist Elton Bailey describes his artworks and what the exhibiting artists hope to achieve.
Basically what I'm doing now is working with active against passive moods, such as you see in Unguarded Vanity, where you have a sort of somber mood working over an active mood that's on top. And also the piece on the end, which is Solitude, is working with cool colors that gives you another mood of quietness, of being alone. That's what's going on in Recluse, which shows you something of being alone or standing alone by oneself.
Now, are these watercolors, oils, or what?
No, these are basically screen prints.
And what inspired you to do these?
Well, put it this way. Basically, I was working with acrylics, and I was a painter, and I knew the show was going to take place, and I wanted to start working again. So it was like something inside of me that was driving me to crank up again instead of staying stagnated as I was, because for a few years after school, I just remained sort of stagnated in the arts. And when I knew the show was going to happen like a year or two ago, it just made me start working again. So,
do you feel as though this exhibit is going to open up new doors for contemporary black artists in New Orleans?
Well, I would hope so. I mean, it's something that we needed in the past to happen. I'm glad to see that it has happened. And I hope people become to recognize as artists first, and then black artists secondly.
Dr. Jack Jordan is chairman of the art department at Southern University, New Orleans, and a nationally exhibited sculptor. His I Remember series of wood sculptings is a part of Exposition in Black.
The work that you're looking at now is a series of wood sculptures. They were realized from the, not the found object necessarily, but from the thrown away object. These were old telephone poles, as in my hometown from Oklahoma, they call it telephone poles, but I think they call them pilings here. I've been known to pick up all the pilings that I can find as I see homes going up. And as a result of this, the challenge was to carve this, and the challenge was to see what could come from them. The subject matter then stemmed from some of my experiences of black people. I have gone from some of the, I call this the I Remember series. This is just a portion of it. I have dealt with the preacher, the teacher, this common laborer, the washerwoman, the deacons, The many things that I've experienced in my life came in this series, and you're looking at roughly about 8 of them.
And now, more fine works from Exposition in Black.
That's our program for this week. Thanks for watching.
Next week on Folks, a look at the upcoming World's Fair, and we'll visit the Amistad Research Center in New Orleans.
We hope you'll join us then. Until next time, have a good week.
Funding for the production of Folks is provided in part by the Friends of LPB.